Hey everybody, welcome to the Logan Power Show. It's me, your host, Calvin Logan, live here, Impacting Your Life World Ministries here in Goose Creek, South Carolina. Well, we're back here debating. We're back here finding out what's going on in 2019. So again, without further ado, our return guest, he is running for mayor of North Charleston, South Carolina. He's the one and only Mr. John Singletary. How you doing, sir?
Fine, how are you doing today?
Glad to have you here.
My pleasure.
Yes, sir. So last time we had him here, we had a debate. We had him with here, and we had another candidate as well, Pastor Thomas Dixon. But we want to focus on Mr. John Singletary on today due to the fact that he was able to come through. And with his, I know he's a very busy man, so we thank him for coming into the building. So, Mr. Singletary, you was talking about off camera in regards to 53% being African American in the North Charleston area. You talked about also there's about $2.5 billion is being pulled out from our community. Can you tell more about that information that people are unaware of that's going on in our community?
Sure. North Charleston, unfortunately, is a community in which the African American community, roughly 50 to 53% of the population, has had about $2.5 billion sucked out of its wealth. And the way it was happening was that the city, about 8 years ago, they literally went and rezoned the property in the African American neighborhoods. They went through, and property that was commercial, it was multifamily, they rezoned that property to be single family in all of the black neighborhoods. Then what they did was they got in contact with South Carolina DOT. Whether DOT is aware of it or not, I'm not sure. But DOT is going to purchase that property in order to widen I-26, 526. When it comes to the port access, they're purchasing property on Union Heights. And unfortunately, the rezoning has taken about $2.5 billion out of the African American community because commercial property, multifamily property are sold at a much higher rate than the single family. And so when you rezone all of that property, I myself, for instance, had a piece with 4 units on it, okay? Zone multifamily, with 4 units, it is now single family property. So if I'm going to sell it, I'm going to get much less. So all of the property in the African American neighborhood now actually is worth much less than it was before. When we look at over 50,000 residents being African American, close to 35 to 39,000 homes, and we look at the amount that was taken out, it amounts to about $2.5 billion.
Wow.
The city knew when they were doing that exactly what they were doing. In rezoning that property single family only, so that when DOT purchased that property, it would be purchased at the cheapest price. Here's the kicker. When we take a look at those areas, many of those areas in which property that is owned by Caucasians, the mayor himself included, was not rezoned. That means that if you happen to be African American and your property is worth 50 at single family, when they're selling theirs, it may be worth 300. And so you have, through a disparity and discrimination, you have literally sucked out $2.5 billion out of the black community. And that is quite unfair. When we take a look at DOT coming in, we had Councilman Dorothy Williams go on not only the council, but also in the paper, stating how her property would be taken away. And then later she came and talked about how they would be purchasing the property, DOT would be purchasing the property, and when they purchased it, how little they would be getting. And where else could she go? Well, there is no other areas to go to. We've got about 50 African American communities. About 25 to 30 will be affected. 30,000 African Americans will be strategically pushed out and gentrified in North Charleston. We're already number one in the nation when it comes to evictions. And we sit next to the number one in the nation for gentrification, the city of Charleston. As I was talking earlier, there's a recent study that was done. That report encompasses North Charleston, the city of Charleston, and Charleston County. And when you read that report, the report is very clear concerning the disparities that exist. When we hear the term diversity, we think that they're talking about diversity inclusion, because that's what we've in most cases heard. However, when you read the report, it's very clear the diversity that they're talking about is the fact that they're seeing that diversity in North Charleston means that there's too many African Americans, and we must diffuse it by getting rid of some of them. And so gentrification is the way they're actually doing it.
Got it.
And so that's the $2.5 billion that I'm talking about, that our leaders either are not looking at, or they're turning their heads the other way. You just can't suck or pickpocket $2.5 billion out of a community,
Sure.
If anyone's paying attention,
Got
and
it.
expect nothing to happen.
Absolutely. So we understand that right now, currently, that there is money being taken away from people that look like me, and, or look lighter or darker than myself. You mentioned also there was another thing in regards to we have the majority, but no change has come in the past 30 years when it comes to like change. You mentioned there's more African Americans on city council, things like that, but there's not a change when it comes to the mayor's seat. And we mentioned that we have more Democrats that are housed in this area, but we have a Republican mayor. And you mentioned, how is that? So the question that I have is that, is the person that we have in office the right person for us, or am I blind seeing that somebody's getting paid under the table?
The person that we have in office presently is certainly not operating in our best interest.
Sure.
When you take a look at the fact that we had to fight with Department of Justice even to get the right to vote. There's 8,000 blacks in North Charleston today, 8,000 that are in the city limits, but they simply cannot vote because the present mayor and administration, council included, will not annex those people in, and they're not annexing them because they need to keep the black vote diluted. 8,000 new voters in the African American community is more than the 6,300 that he gets to be mayor.
Wow.
And so he is not going to annex them in until he has an overwhelming majority of whites in North Charleston, and then he'll take credit by saying, well, I brought you in to vote, even though the timing of doing that was such that he needed to dilute the African American vote. When we take a look at a couple of other things that you mentioned, the fact that we have people in our community that appear to be selling us out. And when I say selling us out, the very fact that we have a white Republican mayor who endorses Donald Trump, and we have numerous ministers and politicians who claim to be Democrats that are supporting him, understanding clearly that he is gentrifying and taking away from the African American community. We've got 61,000 voters in North Charleston, 38,000 happen to be African American. Well, we are 53% of the vote. We actually now outvote all other races combined. The only reason why North Charleston, which is the richest city in the state, it is the second largest and would be the largest if we were to annex those other people in. The only reason why we're not getting our fair share is because of the seat of the mayor of North Charleston. We've got three types of polity in the state of South Carolina. We've got a strong mayor, weak council, a weak mayor, strong council, and we've got a council-led. North Charleston happens to be a strong mayor, weak council, which means that he manages the city's budget. The council simply sits there to approve the budget and then audit the departments if something goes awry. Well, in a weak mayor, strong council, such as Columbia, Mayor Steve Benjamin. What happens is you have a city administrator and a council that runs the city, including the finances. In a council led, there is no mayor. And so, in a strong mayor, weak council, the person that you must look to when it comes to trying to get parity, equity, fairness of resources, has to be the mayor's position.
Wow.
There's no reason why we should sit here with the majority of the vote, understanding clearly that the present mayor has, with $75 million in contracts, has only seen fit to give African Americans $2 million. Okay? While those in his buddy system walk away with the other $73 million. $66 million in wages. We get $10 million, while they walk away with $56 million. We get 40% of the jobs, but only 20% of the pay. We've got 400 people in the police department, but less than 100 of them happen to be African American, but we have 50% of the population. And so when we take a look at the disparities that exist, there is absolutely no way whatsoever to justify them. North Charleston themselves paid for a report called the North Charleston Fireman Diversity Study. And when you read that, the first thing North Charleston throws up is that, well, what we have is a situation where we can't find qualified black applicants. That's simply not true. Their own study says that there are more qualified blacks apply in number and in terms of education. The only reason why they're not getting hired is because of cronyism, nepotism, and regimenting. I used those three terms the last election, not because I was trying to throw some cloud on the mayor, but because he paid for the study that depicted the city and his administration as one that embraces those three terms: cronyism, nepotism, and regimenting. And so when we look at the actual data, and we look at the reports, and we look at the numbers, there is absolutely no way whatsoever any leader in the African American community could wholeheartedly support him without saying that I care nothing about my African American community. It's just that simple.
Wow. Wow. Well, we want to get to it, in regards to the nitty gritty. What would you change? Like one specific thing that you would see. I know you mentioned some other things in the previous time, but what specific thing you want to see change here in North Charleston if you are elected mayor?
If I had to pick one thing, it would be parity across the board. That means equitable resources. When we take a look at, for instance, the police department, we are the state's homicide capital. We are one of the top in the nation in terms of homicide, the richest city in the state. Why is that? I think that we need to have better equity in the police department. When we take a look at housing, highest in the nation in terms of evictions, there's no reason for that. We could stop gentrification easily. In addition to stopping gentrification, I've got a program that will allow our single mothers as well as single men to own their own home. The average African American in North Charleston makes between 24 and 30,000. The average Caucasian happens to be making about 66 to 70,000. Now, we're not anti-white. We're pro-black in that we are simply trying to level the playing field that all citizens are treated fairly. A housing program that allows CDBG funds to come in and assist not only selected few, like those who move into Mixon, those who from out of town come and move in Oak Terrace, or the ones who are only under the thumb of the mayor when it comes to employees of the city. That program can be allowed to reach out in the community so that others who want to own their own home literally can own their own home and pay less than what they're paying in rent.
Wow.
Those programs are absolutely available. when we look at what the city of Charleston did. The city had a program under urban revitalization that allowed people to come in and purchase homes at their lowest. I know my opponent says that you can't purchase a property and own a home while you are at the poverty level. That's just not true. The truth of the matter is, on the one side, we have one saying that, well, it can't be done, and on the other side, understanding it can't be done, but not having the willingness to do it. And I say that because when you look at people who move into the mixer, they've gotten not only down payment assistance, they've got low interest rates from the bank, and there's no way, unless 4 people came to the table strategically, that any builder would come and in the middle of a African American neighborhood where you're paying $500 for rent, build a neighborhood that requires $1,100 to $2,200 in rent, unless he had someone with jobs to come to the table and said, no, we're going to give them the jobs to be able to take care of the rent. You've got a bank who's willing to say, I'm going to finance that. You've got a city administration who says that, well, yeah, I'll give you permits. We're going to help you. We're going to help them get assistance. And then you've got a developer who's willing to say, I'm going to come and I will build it. So they have not only the expertise and capability of doing it, it's a matter of not willing to share that with other people.
Okay, got it. So what we're going to do, we'll be right back at this quick commercial break. We're going to ask if anyone has any questions, and we right back in the next 30 seconds. And we're back live here at the Logan Power Show. This is the time that we're going to ask the studio audience to ask a question. So, sir, what question you got?
Hey, how you doing? My name is Carlos Johnson. I have a youth program in the city of North Charleston. I'd like to know what would be a good way to get youth more education about the voting system and how it can do what it's supposed to do, which is supposed to help. And the reason why I ask you that is because there's a lot of people here that don't believe in the voting system that are my age because of, let's say, history, which keeps on repeating itself here in our local district.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are many programs that are available. For instance, the NAACP has now a youth program where they're trying to get youth to come in to be a larger part of the NAACP's push. They do canvassing, they do education. They don't endorse a particular candidate, but what they do is they have a get out to vote campaign that helps to educate youth why is important. They go back and they take a look at the history of the Voting Rights Act, as well as some of the different things that have been done. We see where just recently in Georgia, they had 50,000+ people that they denied the right to vote, which could have made a difference in the race. And so it's extremely important that youth do get involved. When we look at North Charleston, we had in 15 a total of 28,000 African Americans who did not vote. 28,000. It's a lot of people. So we have an opportunity to go out and get those people to come to the table. The city itself does not have a voting initiative to get any citizen out to vote. I think that's a tragedy. But again, the city is not going to be about you coming to the table to vote when in fact the administration that's there now could possibly change. And so it's going to have to come from organizations like NAN, like ACLU, like NAACP, and other organizations, as well as the churches. We've got 280 black churches in North Charleston. And out of those 280 churches, they touch the majority of our community. Most of our communities have about 3,000 people that sit in them. And out of the 3,000, about 300 vote. And so a door-to-door campaign to get people out to vote would assist. Sitting down and explaining to young people, why is it important? The struggle that we went through and the people and the lives that ended up dying as a result of, and young people who were involved in the struggle to vote. It's extremely important. We're in America, and while we're in America, we have a process of the majority, at least for the local election, majority rule, and select the people that govern us. And so they have to get involved. Used to be in a civics class, you'd get extra credit. Once you brought in, as a senior, you brought in your voter's registration. That's not done anymore. And so we have to, in the homes, take responsibility to make sure that we educate in the homes as well as outside to bring people to the table, because it is those young people that are missing. Women from 65 and above vote more traditionally than any other sector of the population. In 15, though, we actually had an influx of males to vote and young people. We had a total of 3,500 new people that came to the table. The majority of those were young as a result of education. So we have to do it. There's not a city program that's going to do it for us, but we do have civic organizations that will assist.
Amen.
Can I ask one more question?
Go ahead. Go
So
ahead.
what would be a message you tell a young person to get them to the polls to vote? Something that's going to catch a young man like me, like, hey, stop the police from killing you, come vote. You know what I'm saying? Like, what will be something that would be very catchy and quick to make sure that our youth knows that it is very important to vote, even though in the past history our vote really didn't matter, or we had to fight for it, or people died for it. What would be something that you would say to get us there?
I keep it real. I sit down with people, I talk 10, 15 minutes, or however long, to get them to understand. If it's a younger person in college or in high school, simple, me being elected means that there's going to be a summer jobs program. Every student in the city of North Charleston will be guaranteed a job. If it's a person who's out of school, just happen to be working, if they are employed through a company, what I feel I'm pushing for is not $15 an hour, but $25 an hour. Why? Because the national average hourly wage is $25. So why are we going to be taking a look at being subservient when it comes to the hourly wage? Why do we want less for our people than the national average? We want $25 an hour, but now to do that, understand that there's a relative worth. So we have to look at the whole spectrum, because you can't have a person making $25 an hour who's never gone to school or anything else when a teacher's gone, wasted her, put her time into being educated, and she's making the same thing. Otherwise, what's the sense in being a teacher? And so it has to be a relative worth, so we have to move the entire spectrum, which is good. It should be moved. If I had to pick one thing, it would be starting the conversation by your vote matters, and then explaining to them why. If it's a young single female, it's going to matter under my administration because she's going to have the opportunity to own a home if she doesn't. If it's a young man, understand you're a young black male, and there are more black males in North Charleston than any other sector of the population. There are more black males than females, black females. There are more black males than white males or white females. We actually have 19,000 black males registered to vote. Only 2,500 of them voted. Understand what I'm saying? We have the ability to pick ourselves up out of the ditch because black males alone, if they were to galvanize, could change who sits in the mayor's seat. 19,000, the mayor only gets 6,300 votes. And so brother to brother, we need to talk about doing what's necessary to protect our family, to make sure that the jobs that are at the city and the things that the city influence, we get our fair share. We can do that if we came together. And so that's why, for my campaign, the mission and the slogan is unity in the community. If we had that alone, and again, it's not a black-white issue only because we have whites in the city that ought to get parity as well. You know, he's not spreading the resources among all the whites in the city. It's only a select few that are close to him in his good old boy system. If you had, if you were a parent, say you had 3 children, and you gave all of the resources to one, the children are going to have some strife because they're not getting. But that's because of your denial of the other 2 and mismanagement giving it only to one. And so that's the same thing that's happening in North Charleston. We've got good-hearted local whites who want to see fairness across the board, parity and equity. We have African Americans, we have Asians and Hispanics that want to see the same thing. However, the administration is not sharing, they are denying 60+% of the population from accessing the resources. Just look at the neighborhoods. Look at Cameron Terrace, look at Westcott. Then go look at Ackerby, look at Union Heights. Look at $1 million gives it every year to the golf course in Westcott. Those kind of funds aren't put in the African American community. Even when they're federal funds like the Weed and Seed, where they got $3.5 million a year for 10 years to correct the problem that was in Union Heights, because Echo Avenue was noted as the highest in the nation in terms of homicides. And so they got from the Department of Justice those federal funds and pulled them down, but they did not put those funds in Union Heights. They transferred those funds, CSX, Barnes Avenue LLC, Seacoast Church. A lot of people got funds who were not even in the area. The reason why is because if they fix the problem, then the federal funds are shut down because you don't have a problem now. So what they want to do is they want to prolong the problem as long as they can pull the federal funds down and then divert the funds elsewhere. Young men are $1 million men if they can get them in the system. Understand what I'm saying? If, let's take the Weed and Seed program. If a young man gets killed on Echo Avenue, then the young man who dies goes to, unfortunately, the cemetery. There are funds that are given by the state for that. They are the victim advocate funds, okay, for the family that have lost. The mayor and the present assistant, who used to be the police chief, Driggers, took those funds and went and bought cars. The governor had to come down and say, hold on, those funds are for the people who are victim advocates. Sell cars and give the money back. Okay? So one way money is being taken out. Now, the young...
I'm sorry, I don't mean.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
We're just talking.
So that happened.
Yes, it happened.
Those people are still in office. Like,
Of course.
We're not gonna.
Because we haven't voted them out.
But does the community know that happened? That's my first time.
Well, that's why I'm trying to tell them. Because most of the community, no, they don't. But this is why we research and read, so we can bring these things to the forefront, as well as a solution. We don't bring just problems.
Right.
We also bring the solution. And in this case, this is a habitual activity where funds that have gone and been acquired for us have been diverted other places. The young man who goes to jail, the federal government pays about $60,000 a year in South Carolina to house a prisoner. So they're pulling those funds down, okay? Not just the weed and seed money, but also the victim advocate money, now also the federal funds for the housing of the prisoner. It doesn't stop there now, because when you're in there, now somebody gets the contract, right, out of those federal funds, food, clothing, everything they need while they're in there. We're not getting those contracts, okay? They're going to the selected few. In addition to that, corporations hire them while they're incarcerated. $22.50 an hour. 50 cents goes to the young man that he has to pay in the canteen to purchase things to live on, while the $22 goes to the other side. Doesn't even stop there. Why? Because once he's out, he's got to pay to be on probation. You understand what I'm saying? And so they are $1 million men if they can get them in that system.
How do you galvanize a community here? Because I left here 20 years ago. And if I had stayed here, I would have never become an attorney. I would never have the things that I have. The mentality here is still the same. When I came here, I went downtown to the market. You guys need to tear that market down. And in Germany, they tore down everything Hitler did in the Holocaust. But you guys still had black people in the market selling things to other people. And when I walked in there, I felt fine. Because when I walked in there, I had my jewelry on, I had my car, I own things. When I came here, when I left here at 21, and I went to New York, I was like, oh, this is a big city, I'm scared. But if I had not gone, I would not have gone to Columbia University, became an attorney, and have been an attorney for 16 years. When I came back to South Carolina, to me, nothing has changed. To me, nothing has changed, because when I came here to become a member of the South Carolina State Bar, they told me I could not for a year. So I've been here for a year, and I just applied. They checked to see if I was a lawyer in good standing with the bar in New York, because I have reciprocity with New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. They found out that I did. I went to do interviews at certain law firms, and they loved my resume. They loved my resume because it's Columbia and NYU and the College of Charleston and Wharton, right? Because I hold 4 degrees. But when they saw me and they saw the braids and they saw that I wasn't, you know, because my name is Ryan Thompson, right? So when they saw that, oh, that sounds like that's a white male, and the pedigree sounds right. But what I look like is totally different from what that resume looks like, right? So they didn't hire me. And the ones who wanted to hire me offered me $106,000 to be AGC, which is Assistant General Counsel in their firms, doing the work of other people who are there, who would be under me, who are making more money than me. So I'm leaving South Carolina again, because I can't be here, you know, because I can make far more money if I leave. But it's not just about the money. I feel sorry for the people who are here, because it feels like Stockholm Syndrome. It feels like we're staying here, and these people are stepping above us, and we're far smarter than them. Because I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you could change. You should be the president of the United States, not just a mayor of North Charleston. Because you're articulate, you have good plans and good programs. But how are we going to galvanize the people? Because we're lazy here. There's so many things we don't know here. I sat and I talked to people, because he's my fiance, and we do the boxing program together. You listen and you talk to they're not thinking about, okay, well, this person got this and I can go get this contract, because they don't believe that they can do it.
But let me say this. Well, city of North Charleston and Charleston are two different cities. The city of Charleston has built its tourism industry around the market.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a Civil War fight if someone wanted to tear it down.
Yeah.
Not saying that it shouldn't be. I'm just saying that that's the reality. Now, when it comes to North Charleston, you're an attorney. North Charleston, in its budget, gives $5 million every year that they farm out to attorneys. Not one black attorney has ever gotten a dime. Okay? $5 million a year. Not one black attorney has gotten a dime out of that money that some contracted out. Now, how do we reach them? We reach them by sitting down and educating them. And it's going to take a little longer, and because we have been given not only disinformation, but misinformation and everything else. And as a result, we have to overcome that. And that's why it has been slow, but we're making progress. We went from 2,211 to, in 2015, 5,513. North Charleston is in the Deep South. Now, that doesn't mean that we're the only place that gets racism. Let's take New York, for instance. New York Central Park. Central Park used to be an all-black community. All black. And what they did was, they said, we need a park for white people to go and to play. So they took that black community. North Charleston, New York is also one of the highest when it comes to gentrification. But when you consider the size, a lot of people who are African American are doing great things. Here, it's a microcosm of what is happening throughout the United States. We have to go all the way back to the Compromise of 1877, and I know you clearly understand it because after that, following that, came the 1983 actions, the Ku Klux Klan Act, and everything else. And we are still, right now, feeling the effects of that in South Carolina, because they basically said, listen, if you take the troops and move them out, that's going to give fairness. Then what we will do is we will give you the presidency of the United States. Just let us do with them what we want to. So Reconstruction's over with and all that. And so they instilled policies and procedures like nowhere else in the United States.
Right.
And so that's why we see a lot of areas maybe moving a little bit faster. It is because through the assistance of the government, by denying African Americans in the Deep South, South Carolina included, they denied them the protection to move forward and the protections of the United States Constitution. So we're still dealing with Dred Scott.
So what are you doing to galvanize the community to get them around putting you in office?
Every single day, every day, we go out, we talk to, we educate our people. We've given out over 5,000 pamphlets that goes through the history of North Charleston and the opportunities that are available if we stick together. Understand that we still have the reality that we have some who are willing to take a few dollars at the expense of the entire community. Right. So what happens is the administration pays a few people. Everything from money to land to grants. And that's some of the subtle things that they do that we don't see. On the other end, they threaten, they come in and they hold things over people's head, not to hurt them, but to control them. And so we have to, as a community, which is why unity and community, again, is what our slogan is. What we have to do is we have to, against all of that, we still have to fight the annexation. We have to fight the municipal underbounding and all those kinds of things that people never even know exist, to educate enough of them. You know, we've got 56 black mayors in North Charleston, in the state of South Carolina, 56. But none of them really control a significant budget. That is why this city, being the richest city in the state, with the most number of blacks. That is why it's so important for us to be able to have not only our voice heard, but for us to get equal share based on parity.
Right.
Boeing puts $22 billion a year into South Carolina through North Charleston. We don't get equity when it comes to the contracts from that. African American attorneys are hard to find in the Deep South, particularly any that will fight civil rights, because there's a stigma attached and they are blackballed if they fight civil rights. And so most of them, they graduate and they leave, or they just choose not to come back. But for those who stay, we have to understand that educating little by little is how we're going to accumulate it. We're not going to all of a sudden, and I don't think there's any area in the country, in the United States, and I've been to most of them, where they actually are going to come in, even Atlanta, Chicago, New York, where they're going to just simply boom, all of a sudden everybody's on the same page. We have to fight it. And it's a long, grueling process. And we can't fight it with the intent that I have to get it done in my time. We need a longer range plan that encompasses the youth.
But everybody
Absolutely
wants
right.
to know the benefit for themselves.
Yeah,
When
they
you're
do.
selling something, because before I became a lawyer, I was in sales, right? So when you're selling something, I have to show you the benefit for yourself. So that's what that's what people think about.
At some point, even though he feels that he'll benefit, he'll still fight if he knows his son's going to benefit.
No, that's true.
But the benefit to us today
I'm
is
saying that should be part of your platform.
It is.
It's the benefit for each person. Because when you go get a job or you go or you move someplace, it's about the benefit for you, and
That's why we talk about the $320 million that is being denied the African American community right now, that we will put in the community.
But what is everything?
Right.
We have to. That's how Donald Trump, I think, got in office.
Yeah.
Because he said, okay, you should have this, you should have that, you should have this job.
You should have jobs, you should have contracts, better education.
Yeah.
And so we talk about those things to them because it's now and in the future. You know, if we control the richest city in the state, there's no reason why, if you have a person who has the courage to stand up and say that without apology, I will treat everyone, including my people, fair.
Okay.
And that's what we say.
So what would it take for you to open your own law firm?
What would it take?
Yeah. Well, the reason why I'm telling you this is that because you got to understand how money flows.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley Phosphate, Dorchester Road, Rivers Avenue is over $500 million. I've done my study, almost close to $1 billion. Down Rivers Avenue to there, you got to understand how law firms work. You just mentioned if I get $106,000. So if you say like if he became mayor, things like that, you would look into we got Speak Freely Foundation, and we talk about Science of Boxing, of how you can partner together to change the information. See, the problem we have with African Americans is that our good ones leave. When they leave, then the bad ones are here to stay, and they just fall out and they die. And what happens is that the education piece, the uplifting, doesn't really make a difference. Like me personally, I'm from Los Angeles, California. I could leave in a hot minute.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is from here. I see a lot of things, but see, I got what's called a big mindset. So you can take big city and bring it to small place and make a lot of money. He talks about the numbers. There is there. If you go on North Charleston's website, you'll see the actual, literally, what the money comes in. The mayor makes about over $176,000 a year, and he makes $10,000 more than the city of Charleston mayor, Mr. John Tecklenburg. But downtown is considered to be number one when it comes to tourism. But the reason why North Charleston is more because you got Boeing, and you got other things that's there. You got to understand how it flows. So by you leaving, I get it, man. New York, man. Hey, you talking about $250,000, $500,000, hey, you need to start paying me. But you gotta look at this. Say if I got the 106,000, and then I look and say, well, I partnered with doing my own foundation, use that building to help do not just their building, but help my law firm at the same time. So I'm double dipping the money. It's like I'm having a foundation, I'm flipping the business back and forth. So for me personally, I feel you're a beacon of light. Because what happens a lot in our system, just think about Al Cannon Detention Center. The 1,200 people that are there, about 85, 90% are males. And those males, about 60% African American. Most of the times people are staying on bail time just to get the heck up out, just even get a court date. So an average person's getting them out maybe a month, maybe 6 months, some on average a year before their case is being in front of the judge. Some people are being overcharged, overdone for times in. So a person that with your mindset that has that much knowledge, you would kill the system that you have it when you have the Scarlett Wilsons, the her being here. A lot of these people that are plaintiffs that are here for North Charleston, that their job is book. It's like a fast food restaurant. And they have a nice, good record, 100-0, or people taking plea deals and they can't afford a lawyer.
Well, I fought for people in New York. I fought to get rid of bails. So, I went to deal in Texas with Sandra Bland's situation. So I'm all about civil rights, and I don't have a problem with fighting. My grandmother was hit and beaten in the Woodworth County in North Carolina. I'm all for fighting. However, if I don't have the people behind me to fight with me, I'm going down and I'm gonna be a martyr for what?
Got it. I definitely hear you.
When Martin Luther King said, "I fear I brought my people into a burning house," I become pro-black now. So everything is about what I can buy that's black. What that I can do for my community, because I don't feel like asking them for inclusion is working. I don't think inclusion works. I think us just spending our money with ourselves and doing like every other community does.
Mm-hmm.
The Asian community doesn't worry about what others do. They just spend money within their community, and they have a force of power that can't be beat. In New York, they had Lou, Supervisor Lou. It was a Korean officer who killed a black young man. And he was wrong. He pulled out his gun. The gentleman was the African American young man was in a stairwell in the projects in New York, and Marcy Projects, where Jay-Z came from. He shot him, right? This officer shot him. Do you know the Asians, they didn't come outside, they didn't protest, they didn't ask anybody for anything. You know what they did? They called Supervisor Lou. You know what happened? Supervisor Lou called that Asian judge. You know what happened? That Asian cop was removed from the police department, but not a day spent in jail. You understand what I'm saying? So for me, we have to stop talking and begging for inclusion. We have to just spend our money with ourselves. We just have to make our iron fist felt, and we never do. When another Asian gentleman was on, what was it, Delta or American, and they pulled him out, what happened the next day? Their stocks went down. All the Asians pulled their money out of it. That's what we have to do. We can't keep begging them for inclusion because it's not working. We can't keep begging them to give us when they're not doing it. We have to stick together and do what we need to do. But we're not. We have to stop saying it's okay for young black women to have babies and be by themselves and let the studying continue. We have to stop doing that. You know, we have to stop saying, oh, well, let's give the single mothers a home and this and that. No, we have to start saying, hey, the black man needs to stay in the household. Because this is why we're getting recidivism and the going and being incarcerated in the first place. Because they're not seeing and the homosexuality in the community and the this and that. And I don't have anything against gay people or what are they doing. But it's too much. It's too prevalent in our community now, and it's systematic. And going in the system and seeing and working in the corporate world and hearing them talk when they don't know I'm around. You start to learn these things and you realize that it's far greater than us, and we have to use our dollars. These congressmen and senators and presidential candidates, all they have to do is come and dance and shuck and jive, and then we vote for them. But they're not doing anything in our community. We have to actually stand up and hold them accountable. And I hope
You're right. I'm listening to you because, you know, you sometimes have to spoon feed rather than with the fire, because otherwise people feel, you know, I'm drinking out a fire hydrant, and they'll drown. So when we take a look at the things that you are concerned with, you're absolutely right. The target audience that we have to bring them along to the point where they feel, like you said, that there is something in it for me. And that's why I'm going to get out and vote. And so that's why we go and we take the time to not only keep it real, but to talk to them on whatever level we can meet them at in order to explain to them.
Amen.
I think you had another
So,
question.
yes,
Are
sir.
you practicing in South Carolina right now?
No, not yet.
You're not practicing in South Carolina.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain the importance of your local election versus your general election, nationwide election?
Sure. Our local election, your local election affects your everyday life much more than the general election, your national election, your state, or your county, because the ordinances and everyday things that affect you come from the local administration. When we go out and vote, that's not to say that we shouldn't, but we should be more involved in all elections, but we've got to be involved in the national elections. We're not saying they're not to get involved, but what we're saying is there should be an overwhelming majority of our African Americans who come out for the local elections, because it is the local elections that determines housing and jobs and contracts that are already in your area. And you want to get your fair share of those things. It is the local administration that determines whether or not out of that $75 million in contracts you get more than $2 million, or the $66 million in wages you get more than $10 million, or whether or not you get any of the special projects that happens to be $18 million, or whether the $5 million that's given to attorneys, whether an African American attorney can get one dime of that, or whether or not the hundreds of thousands that's been given every single month in paying the bills, the utility bills for churches, whether any of those dollars go to the African American community. And presently, out of that program, the mayor has chosen to only pay the utilities for white churches only. Not one African American church out of 280 in the city has gotten a dime towards their utilities. So it is the local election, because the local mayor and a strong mayor weak council, his responsibility is to manage that budget. And that means that he is the person who hires the department heads and determines whether or not the funding gets back into the community. So that's why the local election is so important.
Amen, amen. So you just heard it, ladies and gentlemen, here at the Logan Power Show. Mr. Singletary, we thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
I told you, we on the fire for the Logan Power Show. I told you right now, we having a global conversation. I'm about the community. I told you right now, we could be anywhere. I could be anywhere in this world, but I'm here. So I'm going to make a difference in my community. Y'all can sit there, sit back, talk all you want. Hey, if you want to get connected to the Logan Power Show, go to our website, www.theloganpowershow.us. Put your information in the contact section. If you want to give to our show, you can more than happily do so. We're here to make a difference in this community. Start this global conversation. Hey, we love you, family. We'll see you on next week.